All right, we are off. One sec. Let's see if I can take down the slide here. Oh, there it goes. Welcome everyone. This session we're going to be discussing audience growth with a few people who have massive audiences. Noah Kagan, founder of AppSumo, a place to buy and sell business building tools. He teaches over 500,000 entrepreneurs and marketers through his YouTube channel, Twitter, and newsletter. He's got a podcast, Noah Kagan Presents, got over 200 episodes, hundreds of thousands of listens. We have Sahil Bloom, an investor and an entrepreneur. He explains finance and global markets to over 300,000 investors through his Twitter and newsletter. Also the host of The Room Where It Happens. And then we have Dan Held, who's the head of growth at Kagan, cryptocurrency exchange. He's got over 420,000 people who listen to his thoughts on Bitcoin on Twitter. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Certainly. Noah, let's go ahead and start with you. You've been a content creator for well over a decade now. I'm curious to hear how's your mindset around audience building and growth sort of evolved over the years.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. Hello, everyone. For the audience, I love to see also the audiences, like where you guys are at with their content creation. It's evolved, man. It's really interesting about building an audience and engaging. I think a lot of it at the end of the day is still one-on-one. Right? Like, how are you one-on-one connecting with the different people that are interested in the things you're talking about? I think a lot of people want to build an audience, but I don't know if they're willing to put in the work required over a long period of time. The medians have shifted. I mean, that's been interesting, right? Like, it was very much into blogging and like, let me guest post on your site. And now it's like, can you get a retweet? It's still the same shit. It's just like, are you creating content that's interesting enough that people are wanting to connect or learn more about it with you?
Got it. Yeah, Sahil, I know you've got thoughts on how to think about audience growth and.
Yeah. No, I think what Noah said is a lot of what I would echo. I personally think that we've experienced this shift, and the two guys on here with me are great examples of this, of really building community as you build audience and really focusing on that and trying to create, beyond just sheer numbers, create a group of people that are evangelists for you out in the market, and people that are talking about the content you're putting out because you're creating genuine value for them and because you're engaging with them. It used to be, I think, like maybe 2.0 version of audience growth was this, like, the Kardashians, like this mass following, and you tweet things out or Instagram things out, and then you just send a picture and that's that. I think the new phase of it is going to be all about how do you actually create, true fans, people that really evangelize what you're putting together. And I think, I've followed Dan and been a big fan of some of the stuff he's doing. Noah as well, with the videos in particular, I've always really admired. And one of the things I think these guys do exceptionally well, and something that I've tried to adapt into my own work, is really foster community, really engage with people. I keep my DMs open for a reason, because I like to engage with people and really foster that. And that's, I'd say, my kind of biggest realization recently is how important that is and how much that drives engagement as you continue to scale.
And then, Dan, did you actually mean to grow an audience? Was that like your intention here? Or was that sort of like a natural byproduct of just like being vocal about how you feel about Bitcoin?
I would say it was intentional. My background's in growth marketing. So when I started to talk about Bitcoin, I knew that there was a possibility that my voice could grow. And then as my voice grew, of course, as a growth marketer, I couldn't help but tweak and press different levers to continue that growth. And so for me, it's been kind of a very new experience. I think Noah has been around a lot longer, writing about this stuff, right? Like building audiences and thinking about this more than I have. 3 years ago, I didn't really consider myself a public speaker or a writer. And from there, just started to kind of iterate and day after day. And I think Noah touched on this, and I think it's a very important point to hammer home early on. This is a game of consistency, and this is a game of delivering value and delivering content on a very regular basis, and you have to keep delivering that content. And so for me, I sort of stumbled into the best practices, but those best practices ended up treating me pretty well in terms of my growth of my audience, is that I put in the day after day work of writing, speaking, and tweeting, and over time figured out, this must be how these algorithms work. This must be how great content is made. So I think the intent was to grow an audience, but I don't think I knew exactly how to get there.
And what are those best practices, like for like specific tactical things that you've uncovered over the years?
Yeah. So consistency is the number one most important thing. And here's why. When you tweet, and you put out a piece of content, most people are passive Twitter users. So they sit there and they absorb content, and there's like 1% that creates all the content. If your audience who reads your content, if they open up their phone and you don't have a tweet for them that day, the Twitter algorithm needs to find another tweet to keep them engaged. And so it'll use another tweet from another content creator to keep them engaged. And a feedback loop starts to develop with that other content creator. So it's very critical that you deliver content to your audience on a daily basis, or depends on the channel. YouTube might be weekly, to where when they engage with the platform, they're entertained, and that engagement loop continues to build, gives you more followers, gives you more engagement, and that spirals upwards over time. So consistency is really huge. I would say content market fit. A lot of people like to say what they want to say, and that's cool. And I say exactly how I feel about Bitcoin. Now, certainly I tweak my message a little bit to make sure my audience likes exactly how I say it. For example, do I always like to tweet 1 or 2 liners about Bitcoin? I love Bitcoin, but I'd like to speak a little bit more eloquently than just 2 lines about a very bullish statement. So in my newsletter, for example, I get to do that. I get to talk a little bit more long form, where in email, I don't have to worry about an algorithm. It goes directly to my audience's inbox. So, thinking about how the algorithm works, thinking about what content resonates with your audience, it's all about the audience. And the only thing that matters is what content they want to hear and how they want to hear it.
Content market fit. That's such a fascinating sort of framework that I want to dig into a little bit more. Noah or Sahil, do you have any thoughts around content market fit? Like, how do you approach that with your own audience?
Yeah, Sahil's, I'll shut up quickly, but I think the things that are interesting is I think people should be mindful of where is the way I'm going to build my audience, and where's the way I'm going to actually connect with my audience. It's kind of the way I've always approached it, which is like right now, YouTube has been the #1 channel for me, where I've spent about $500,000 this year just on growing the channel. And then my email list is really where I'm not dependent on an algorithm changing something on me. So I think that's kind of a key thing, regardless of your content market strategy. At a high level, I think what I'd encourage anyone who's in the audience to think about, it's hard to know what's going to be popular. I think you called it right, Dan. Like, what do you want to write about and what people give a shit about? And then where's that intersection? The way that I've liked approaching it is just like having a very clear goal of what you're trying to accomplish. So is it a certain amount of subscribers? Is it a certain amount of audience, whatever that is? And then how do you have more structure in that? Like, one of the things we've talked about is like, how do you commit to 100 days of whatever it is you're trying to do? If it's like audience creation, or if it's marketing, whatever it is, just like commit 100 days of doing it every single day. Because I think what I've observed is some people treat it like a hobby, expecting professional results. And if you're like Sahil and Dan, and myself included, we treat it like a job. It's a professional sport, professional activity. And then there's a different way you're going to approach that versus just, oh, I put out a tweet and it didn't go viral. What happened? Like, are you actually understanding it? Are you dissecting it, and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I think I picked that up actually from being around people like you guys, and Dan's a great example of that. I had dinner with Dan, maybe, what was it, like a month ago or so, and I learned more at that one dinner from how he thinks about and dissects his own analytics and figures out what works and what doesn't, how he thinks about monetization across the various channels. I learned more at that one dinner than I had learned in the 16 months prior of doing this and writing it. And so, but part of me just thinks it's about getting around the people that are thinking about this on that like next level plane and learning from how they're doing it and how they're adapting to it. I mean, Julian Shapiro, who's obviously a Demand Curve team and has been a great friend of mine. I've learned a ton from just being around him in the early days and how he was thinking about it and what was working and what wasn't. To the point on content market fit that Dan made, I think it's super important. It's also something to be really deliberate about. Like who are you writing for? And when you put out a piece of content, who is the audience that you are going after with that piece of content? For Dan, he really knows, on a daily basis, who's following him, what they're following him for, what they want. I would say my audience has been probably like a little bit more diverse over the 18 months that I've written, just because I've written about such a wide range of topics. And so I haven't attracted this like one core following that wants one thing from me. And so it's a little bit more tricky sometimes for me to figure out what's going to work, what isn't. I mean, I'll write a thread on Evergrande and like the collapse of the Chinese property development sector. And then I'll jump and write something about, some mental model or decision-making framework. And so I need to think about and be deliberate about expanding that kind of core topic area that I'm kind of able to and have the right to go write about over time. And that's just something that I have to wrestle with and deal with as I continue to grow.
I think there's everyone here, I think pretty sure everyone here knows Anthony Pompliano on Twitter. A really big Bitcoin bull. I think he's done an interesting sort of, he's looking at adjacent audiences and adjacent topics outside of Bitcoin. So, to Sahil's problem, you look at like, okay, I've built up this audience, but they're kind of like a lot of different voices. There are a lot of different folks. And, Pomp is coming, Anthony Pompliano goes by Pomp. Pomp is coming from a different direction. If he's like very narrowly focused on Bitcoin, how does he expand his audience beyond Bitcoin? And it's really interesting to see him sort of pivot and try to not pivot, but like maybe like a soft pivot in terms of seeing like his Better Business show, which is more about business than Bitcoin. Same with, for example, another podcaster called Peter McCormick. Peter McCormick came out with a couple more like libertarian leaning sort of podcasts to see if you could break out of that audience that was kind of narrowly defined as Bitcoiners. And so it is an interesting path of like finding your audience, but then finding content that they like, or expanding your audience and expanding like, or do you create you spin out different content under a separate brand, or do you keep it under the same brand? This is, I think, a struggle that a lot of folks go with, because we find like this huge amount of audience growth in a certain topic, which my Bitcoin audience isn't slowing down, but I'm in a Bitcoin bull run. So I'm sure that will change in the next couple of years when, Bitcoin might have another bear market where it had one the last two bull runs we had. So I wouldn't be surprised if that occurred. So I think it's just really interesting to see how people position their brand and their content with these kind of like ever-changing sands of audience and engagement with the content. For example, like there's some funny ones that I've tried. So I've got my core Bitcoin content, right? Well, there's a joke in Bitcoin of like, if Bitcoiners become so wealthy, they'll buy citadels or like castles, if you will. So I started posting pictures of castles. people really liked it. I'm like, here's my future beach castle. And people were like, oh, that's cool. And then I might post like a picture of me on vacation, and people like that. So I think it's like you found this like content that resonates super well with your audience, but you can still go pathfind off of that evergreen content and see if there's new sort of threads that you can weave into that to give people more color as to who you are and maybe even tap into new audiences.
And for those who are sort of, sorry, go ahead.
So, yeah, the one thing I would add, Dan, is that you're also talking about a topic that people are begging for. Like you could poop out a Bitcoin thing and people are like, yeah, go viral. So I think, there's something interesting in that. I think the other thing to consider, content market fit, it's like, look at demand. Other things to consider is like, what platform do you want to win on? Right? Like you guys are winning on Twitter. I'm pretty lazy on it. I just hired someone to actually run it for me. And I can talk about, I'll actually just share some of the strategy, the way I'm thinking about it. But I try to win on YouTube. And so I think it's just more, what are the free organic channels that you can get a lot of audience without spending a lot of money? And so YouTube, it's been more topic selection. We can talk about that if people are interested. I think on the Twitter stuff, which you guys have done phenomenally. I love your feedback or criticism. The strategy that I'm observing you guys do and others do that I'm going to have this person on my team start helping me with is like, what are the content categories that work well within Bitcoin or Sahil within your types of content, which is like, here's what I learned thread. And I got that shit where it's like, you have to 80 threads down, summarizing relevant media, crazy statue. I guess what I was trying to figure out is working backwards from like, what is the categorical thing? Like if your topic is real estate, or if your topic is, for me, a lot of it's startups and marketing. What have you guys noticed the types of material around it working?
Well, I think first and foremost, you should think about content ROI. So you do a lot of work, man. I mean, that's incredible and admirable in terms of like building those threads on the reg. That's a lot of work. Tweet storms are a ton of work. So I always think about content ROI. What's interesting is that the shorter form stuff is going to be easier, right, on Twitter. And you're kind of wondering like, so thematically, do you do tweet storms? Do you do which summarizes like a complex topic? Do you get into like more short, sweet, to the point? There are some really cool things to be discovered in Twitter Advanced Search. This is the holy grail of Twitter. Twitter Advanced Search, you can look for Dan Held tweets from a certain time range with a certain number of likes mentioning this word but not that word. It's basically like a very complex, like a very like a GUI for a regex. It's incredible, and you can look that up for anyone on Twitter. So Twitter Advanced Search is the way that I would go explore content around a new type of topic. So whatever topic you want to get into, you could go look at a couple creators, or you could look at the top performing tweets that mention a word. So I think Twitter Advanced Search by far is like my favorite tool to use, and is how I would explore Twitter if I was going there for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Dan makes the point on kind of longer form and content ROI. Just from a growth perspective on Twitter, it is very, very hard to grow with single tweets. I think, Dan, for you, especially now, you have a massive audience, and to Noah's point, they know exactly what they want from you, which is, long Bitcoin broadly, and you provide nuances and details, and then you do your longer form via the newsletter. And obviously that's a separate thing. But with your Twitter, you kind of have a strategy there that clearly works, and it's what people want. In general, if you're kind of cold starting Twitter, you need to do threads if you're going to grow your audience. There's just, the conversion to followers is so much higher on threads than on other pieces of content. And I've got tons of data on this that I'm happy to talk through and share offline, Noah, as well. But threads are always going to be a higher conversion activity. But you need to figure out, what kind of threads for you in particular, and for someone that, is building something, has built things, etc. Pieces of content around insights and learnings that you've developed from actually, being in the trenches and building things, I tend to think work really well, because it's someone that has a lot of credibility from having built something, sharing insights on building something. And there's a lot of people on Twitter that are looking for those insights and want to learn from them. So that's always, a go-to. A lot of people have had success with these like story threads, which I think are kind of waning in the success that they generate, because they became more clickbaity over time, and there were just more people doing them. And so I tend to think you kind of have these like cycles where those things spike, and then people get kind of tired of them and it's eye rolly, and then it kind of wanes off, and not many people are doing that. But for you in particular, if you're able to generate and share real insights that are developed over time and through real experience, I think that's going to be your highest conversion activity in terms of driving follower growth.
What has not worked for you guys? I think that's also is interesting to learn from.
One
thing I do that doesn't work is I come up with all these tweets, and then I tweet them right away, and then I literally give it like a minute. Do you guys do this? And then if it's not hitting a certain like target within them, like probably about a minute, I'd pull.
That's a very smart advanced strategy. One of the best crypto Twitter accounts out there, buddy of mine, grew to 500,000 followers in 6 months. Genius level. That's exactly what he does. He looks for the exact timing. And so he'll put out a tweet. If it doesn't hit, 100 likes in 2 minutes, pulls it, and then does it again in like 30 minutes. I don't have the patience to do that personally. I do a full-time job. But yes, that technique does work. I would say that's more advanced though. I think maybe just exploring like what content resonates with an audience and seeing sort of like this continual growth occur is the way to go. By the way, you can point people from your YouTube channel to Twitter. Be like, hey guys, I just started a Twitter account. Come check it out.
Yeah.
You'll get instantly like 10,000, followers, or you probably have a couple 100,000 on YouTube, or maybe even, I forget how many you have, Noah. How many subscribers do you have on YouTube, Noah?
Almost 200,000. But I've actually found that not to work really well. So if you look at my marketing, like I used to, last year it was like we were doing LinkedIn and Instagram and all the fucking mediums. And it was just, and then trying to get them to cross-pollinate never worked. Like no one left the medium that they were in.
The platforms also do a good job with their algorithms, making sure that you don't go off platform. So if you're on Twitter and you're trying to link to a Substack or you're trying to link to a YouTube, you'll notice it gets no traction. You'll never get any impressions on something that links off platform, unless it like gets completely bulldozed through the algorithm by some massive accounts retweeting it. Generally speaking, it's like going to be low conversion, and you need to figure out how to embed it. I mean, like my strategy for driving from my Twitter to my newsletter is that I embed it at the back of threads that I know are going to potentially go viral, because then a lot of people see it without me just linking to the thing up front in something. So you can kind of bury it in there. To the point though, on like what has not worked. I mean, for me, it might be slightly different because my entire Twitter is built around basically just sharing things I learn on a weekly basis. I write because that's how I learn. It clarifies my own thinking and understanding of things. And so I don't really care if something that I learned that I found interesting, other people don't, and it doesn't go viral, because I'm going to share it either way. So I've never done the like delete things if they're not getting traction, because even if something goes nowhere, if I learned something interesting out of it, it was beneficial to me just personally and in my own growth. So I feel like part of me was not calculating in how I built, especially in the early days, the audience, because it was really just sharing my experiences and learnings along the way.
don't do paragraphs on Twitter. Like, don't
Yeah.
write a whole
Yeah, you got to block it
paragraph.
out.
You got to block it out. You got to
Yeah.
add some spaces in there. I'd say that's like a mistake. Like, I'll go there and I'll type. I've got so many drafts where I've got like a whole paragraph typed out of like just my raw thoughts. Ain't nobody going to read that until you bust it out into like a couple separate lines, make it short and sweet. So yeah, resist the urge to do a paragraph. I've tried it. I'm like, man, this is really good if people just would read it. They love the formatting to be spaced out, to be simple. So that's, no matter what you do, try not to do paragraphs unless it's threaded. So like, unless it's like in a tweet storm where it's like a really good story, then people will read it. But if it's a singular tweet, they usually won't read a paragraph. The cross-channel part I think is interesting and super fascinating journey for myself. I pulled my Twitter audience and I asked them, where else do you hear about Bitcoin? And that's actually how I determined where I should go next. Surprisingly, Instagram has a very small, like people very rarely use Instagram to learn more about Bitcoin. Kind of makes sense. Bitcoin and crypto is a little bit more nuanced than just some pretty images, right? It's a little bit more, I would say, like LinkedIn and YouTube, which is what I found through my polls. That's where my audience lived. That's where they discovered other Bitcoin content, and that's why I decided to build my YouTube channel and start to build out LinkedIn a little bit more. And I've got 45,000 followers on LinkedIn and around 32,000 subs over on YouTube, and that's over the last like 8 months. So it's been a really interesting journey over there in terms of like porting the audience from one platform to another. I've seen pretty good results when I tweet and post on LinkedIn. When I launch a new YouTube video, the first minute it hits, like the new YouTube video goes live, I then direct traffic from these other channels to the YouTube video, which then gives it a spike of engagement. And then the YouTube algorithm surfaces it to more and more folks. I get pretty good engagement, all things considered, like considering how small it is and considering that like I just read my newsletter. I literally scroll through my newsletter and read it. And that's enough engagement to usually get between like 3,000 and 10,000 views for only a 30,000 sub audience. And I'm not talking about Bitcoin price. I'm talking about like more of like topics about Bitcoin. So I do think cross audience pollination occurs, but I do agree as well that with a couple folks who said, here that these platforms inherently don't want you bringing your audience off that platform. So it's not the easiest thing to do. And people have habits. They go to YouTube to learn. They go to Twitter to learn. And they rarely kind of like switch platforms just for you.
Dan, I know you got to hop in 5 minutes. Thanks again for your time today. What do you think about when folks are kind of starting out from nothing, focusing on one specific channel for audience growth versus sort of what you're talking about, some more of an omni-channel approach? How do you recommend folks should take that on?
Yeah, you should start with one channel. Become obsessed with that one channel. Make sure that channel is the predominant channel that the audience you're going for, that's where they exist. So for fashion and stuff like that, that's going to be Instagram. For kind of more like politics or finance, that's typically Twitter. But yeah, I mean, it's very like content specific, but get really good at that one channel. You're going to need to be obsessed with it. You need to figure out all the nuances of how the algorithm works, which there is no book for this. You have to learn from guys like Noah and Sahil. And like, you're going to have to dig in and test and try out things and see what works and be consistent. And so yeah, definitely leaning in, getting really good at one channel. And once you've really hit it big there, then I would focus on other channels.
Got it. And then how should someone choose, if they're running a startup, they've got limited bandwidth, they've got to either grow an audience for themselves or grow it for the startup. Like, how should they really approach that? How should they balance, growing their own personal brand or personal audience versus, simultaneously doing it for their own company?
Yeah, I mean, so organic, social, and SEO are like long-term plays. It's going to take a long time to build up an audience. Yeah, you might get a quick hit, adrenaline rush off of a tweet storm that did really well, and that actually might help your business. But just know that this is like a long-term engagement play and a long-term play that I don't think is like a kind of a quick lever to press. And most startups are looking for like a very quick lever to press to accelerate growth. Again, you might have that one-hit wonder, but this does take a little while. For startups, usually it's only a couple of founders. So I think that the personal voice from the founder is actually more valuable than a corporate brand. It's really hard to balance and by the way, organic social at Kraken rolls underneath my team. It's really hard to balance an organic, like organic social for a brand versus a person. A person just puts a much more friendly face on it, all puns intended. And with a corporate brand, it's hard to like have that personalization. It's hard to have that voice because it represents a product. So your voice is the voice of the product and the voice of the features and the voice of the customers, versus a personal brand is a person. And so I think that for startups, since you're so small, that you should probably have more value accreted to the personal brand, which inevitably helps your startup brand, because you're going to be talking about your startup and you can point them to your startup. But it's much easier to develop a voice for a personal account versus a commercial one.
Noah, you've actually done a really kind of unique job of having a voice for a brand, just sort of like your taco reviews and things like that. I mean, there's like real personality behind the businesses that you're running, but like other than just your personal brand. Like, how have you thought about that?
The honest answer was that I always thought my business was going to go out of business, so I wanted to have a hedge. And I was scared that that AppSumo would go away one day, and I was like, well, at least there's an audience of people who I've built up trust with over, 10 years now, that if I wanted to do something else, I would be able to. I've also, straight up, I enjoy it. I have a friend. He's like gorgeous. He's a doctor too. He's not single, ladies. But he's like, man, I'd love to be social media. I'm gonna go on Instagram, and he does Instagram. And he's like, nah. Then he tries to do YouTube, nah. And I'm like, dude, you just don't like it. I fucking love it. Like, I love attention, right? Like, I got a lot of attention as a kid, and I still want it. And it's balancing that treadmill, obviously, because there's never enough. And so being satisfied with the audience you build, and I still respond to almost every one of my YouTube comments. And so I just enjoy it. I think I enjoy it's like almost like a detective in the marketing. It's like, how do I, Dan's doing it with his content, and Sahil's doing it with his content. I've done it more on YouTube. I'm going to start experimenting with Twitter moving forward, because I think from a brand perspective, Twitter's starting to build an audience of very interesting thinkers, and I think we can, we're doing enough stuff there. I think people connect with people, not companies, like Dan was saying. We have an AppSumo channel and all that stuff. It doesn't really do very well. I think it's like individual.
It's very hard to do.
Yeah, if you think about it, like even Nike or any major brand that we think of, it's generally an athlete or a person, right? Like Tesla's most valuable person is Elon Musk, not the car, maybe.
Yeah, and on Twitter, Twitter especially, when you can't really have a face, if it's a brand account and it's words more than visuals, it's pretty hard to create a great brand account. The ones who have done it exceptionally well, it's because there's a clear personality associated with the account where you feel like the person that's behind it. So like on a larger scale, Morning Brew, I think, has done a really good job with creating personality behind their account. Toby is the guy that runs it, and they've done a good job with that. Medify, I think, has done a great job with it. I think it's like at Try Medify. They have like a very cool, authentic voice within the gaming space in particular, and it's like funny, but you can tell it's some crazy guy behind the account that's sitting there tweeting, and it doesn't feel like a brand telling you cool brand promotions. It really feels like a person sitting there. And so if you're going to do it as a brand, I think you need to have authentic voice, and not just have it be flowery promotions all the time, because people just, their eyes glaze over and they move on.
Thanks for having me, guys. I got to hop.
Dan, great seeing you.
Thanks, Dan.
Cheers, y'all.
Appreciate you.
Where's Dan's Twitter? At Dan Held and theheldreport.com.
There we go.
Yes.
All right, you guys.
Best name in Bitcoin.
Follow Dan for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Cheers. Hodl on.
Hodl on.
Oh shit, Julian Shapiro. Good to see his name. Patrick Herbert, by the way. Shout out for these notes, man. If you want a job or you're looking for something, I think dude, holler at your boy. Your stuff is great.
Add Noah to the Google Doc. Cool. So, common question. I know that this is something that's being upvoted in the Q&A here. If you were to start over, you've got none of your audience. You don't have any of the the name recognition that you enjoy today. How would you go about audience growth? Like, how would you sort of get your first 10,000 followers on your preferred platform? Sahil, I'll let you start.
So I think my recipe for this. There's two steps. It's create great content and then hustle for distribution. And that's just been my recipe from the early days. And I think the hustle is the piece that people miss out on. The reality with these platforms is you can put something great out there, and if no one sees it, it's totally useless. And so when I was doing it in the early days, I mean, not even that long ago, right? It was May of 2020 that I did my first thread. I had 500 followers or something like that. So very few. And the whole game was about hustling, figure out who's going to see it. And like for me in the early days, that first thread got seen because I commented it underneath one of Chamath's tweets, and it was related to what he had said. He saw it, retweeted it, and it was kind of a little bit off to the races from there. But having a distribution plan associated with everything you put out is critical to me. And so if I were to start fresh, that's what I would do. I would treat every piece of content I was putting out like a product. And if you're a startup and you have a product that you're rolling out, you need to have a distribution plan for it. And I think it's the exact same thing here. And, you know, with Twitter, that's making sure you're kind of looped in with the right people, bigger accounts that might like the thing you posted. It's not spamming people's DMs. It's not spamming comments, but being deliberate about if there were 3 to 5 people that would ideally see this and I know it would resonate with them, who are they and how do I make sure it gets in front of them? And that's what I think I would do. I mean, we've seen it with the audience building course we did on Maven. You know, a bunch of people started with literally from 0 and are now at 10,000. And it's been a month since we ran that course. So you can definitely do it. You just need to be thoughtful about it.
I'm not surprised, Sahil, you're an athlete.
I played baseball in college. Yeah.
You're Stanford?
Yep.
Dude, that's so cool. I think it's interesting that I'm not surprised that an athlete does well in these different considerations or different like mediums to build audiences, because it's basically like the playbook is no secret. I think that's kind of the thing that people are looking for. Like, what's the thing? It's like you tweet, and then you know what you do the next day? You tweet more, and then the next day you tweet more, and then you ask people to retweet you and you promote it. I think people are just not willing to put in the work. Like they want the rewards of all this shit, but they're not willing to do it. I think I can give some tactics. But my biggest thing is just commit to 100 days. Like every fucking day, Monday through Sunday, don't take off the Sabbath, don't take off church day, Monday through Sunday, and you tweet. I think specifically on the tactics, I think Sahil commented on some good ones, which is like, there's the micro acquire guy, Andrew Gadzecki. Shit's super annoying. Like I like Andrew, he's a friend. It's like venture capital sucks and don't work hard, work harder. Like just whatever bullshit stuff people are tweeting these days.
I'm an investor in micro acquire for the record.
No, I am too.
I know.
He fucking hit me up, and I was like, sure, let's do it. But I think what he does that's kind of behind the scenes, and Mitchell on our team actually had a tweet go viral, is, and it's I think you commented, is like, how can you strategically get promotion? So some examples is that Andrew, when he does a tweet, it's not luck that it does well. He actually spams emails. Sorry. He emails a ton of people to say, I put out this tweet, you may want to retweet it, or he'll directly text me about it. It's not magic. It's not hope. It's like, oh, yeah, Noah, go do this. Okay. Yeah. And then you guys are going to, here's what they say though. They're like, well, I'm not friends with you. Well, then be friends with me. Like, go figure out how to make the person that you want to get to promote you excited to help you. Right. So if it's someone like Sahil, am I saying your name right? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you got it right. Dan's butchered the hell out of it. Now he's gone. So it's not Sahil. Yeah. Dan likes to add like 8 E's between the H and the L of my name.
Yeah, Sahili. And so I think the same thing with like, for example, and then Mitchell on our team, just to give an example, Mitchell wants to grow his Twitter following. I think Sahil, you know him, and he did a tweet about me, which I was like, that's weird, but cool. And then he's like, hey, Noah, do you mind actually retweeting it? And once that happened, it actually popped off. But I think with marketing in general, don't make it a surprise. So we can go into a little bit more of the tactical stuff. But
the one other point I would add to that, Noah, which is I think the best hack that no one really talks about on Twitter, candidly, is comments are just as powerful as retweets from a big account. And it's much easier to ask someone to comment on something than it is to retweet. I hate when people ask me to retweet things. I blanket don't retweet anything unless it's about my own content. I learned that from James Clear. That was just his strategy. He told me about it early on. I really respected it. Decided to just kind of have that as a blanket approach. And so when people ask me to retweet things, it's like, well, I don't do that. But commenting on something is very easy, and it pops up on everyone who follows me's feeds. And so it's much easier to ask for something like that. It's less cringy, like for you personally, to go ask someone to comment on things. Doesn't feel quite as shameless. And honestly, you can ask it in the context of like, hey, I heard you talking about, when people come to me and they say, oh, I saw you on X podcast, you were talking about Dunning-Kruger effect, imposter syndrome, whatever it is. And so then they say, I wrote this thread on a related topic that I think you might enjoy. That's like a foolproof way to get me to read it and engage with the thing, because now I'm like, okay, they put in a little effort. It's a personalized message. It's not some spammy thing. And yeah, I probably will enjoy that. And if it's good, high quality thing, I want people to see it. And so the comment hack is like the only real hack that I know of that exists, because it's much easier to ask people for than retweets.
Well, I love Sahil. So a few other things that I've observed in my Twitter and just audience building in general is you can go to the Explore tab on Twitter, pick your categorical topic. So if it's real estate, if it's marketing, if it's Bitcoin, and then look for whatever the most popular tweets are, and every day commit 10 comments. Because if you figure out how to make comments that are popular, when people go to the most popular threads, you're just piggybacking on their marketing. So I don't do that aggressively. I'm not trying to grow my Twitter, but when I've done it, I'm like, oh shit, that's working. A few other things I would do is that a lot of people are saying, hey, I want Sahil to retweet me, or I want him to comment. How do I make him be my friend? So there's a few options. Either A, pay him, right? Like sponsor him. Like that is the easiest way to show a higher status to anyone, because they'll take you more seriously. Then now what you're going to say is, well, no, I don't have money. Fine. I still will help you. Then all you have to do is go help Sahil do whatever he's trying to do. So Sahil's trying to grow his Twitter following. Can you make images out of his tweets? Can you do a research Twitter thread about Sahil and why you love him so much, and send that to him without the ask? And that is literally like one of the easiest ways to kind of friend anyway. Like one of my hacks in general that I still do, I did it 20 years ago, I still do today, I'll do it for the next 20 years. I send people like not stupid, but like $100 like really thoughtful gifts. And so I think like recently there's this, dude, for $100, I've probably got millions of dollars in results.
Well, I did the same thing with my job board. Anyone that got a job through my job board, I sent them a bottle of Macallan Scotch. And every single time it happens, it's like they get really happy. They post a picture of it. It's like a really nice thing, but it's hugely beneficial as well, right? In terms of what you're doing. And so it's like doing these little things like that go a really long way. But I totally agree with you. The like create value for someone before you make an ask is a foolproof way of doing all of this. There's this guy, Sachin Ramji, I think is his last name, on Twitter, who for a while was like creating this amazing visual for every single thread I put out. And he would just post it, tag me, and they were awesome. And so then I hired him and paid him to do some stuff on like other things I was working on. And it was literally just because he had just consistently been doing this already for free. And it was like, how can I not, he's grabbing my attention on a daily basis by creating value for me in that way. So it's pretty amazing.
I would only add two other things on the Twitter stuff is just, I call it hand-to-hand combat. So I think especially early on, if you guys are just getting started and you're like sub 1,000 followers on any platform, all of us have 150 people in our life, like at church, at synagogue, at sports, at the bar, at your day job. Go ask them to subscribe. Just go ask them. It's guaranteed, right? Like I think that's number one. Number two, I think Sahil was commenting on this. Just like, how are you building the relationships, right? Like it is so easy to just DM anyone. And then how do you make it so it's a DM that they're, even if you just send a compliment, that's been one of my like superpowers or secrets. It's not even a secret. I'm telling you. I just go and tell people like, there's this guy, I watch a show called Alone. It's my favorite show. I'm not a reality show guy, but I watched the show Alone. It's so amazing. And the winner, I don't want to spoil who it was, but the winner of season 3, I just messaged him. I like DM'd him. Oh shit, I said it's a gender. I DM'd this person. And I was like, yo, I love your stuff. I can't believe how well you did. And he's like, thanks, man. And I did say afterwards, I was like, hey, if you want me to promote you, like, I'd love to promote you to my audience. And whether you have if you have a small audience, just don't say the number. Just like, hey, I have a growing audience that I'd love to promote you to. And now he's like, he responded to me. And so we're going to get him on the podcast. Anywho, I think build relationships one-on-one. The only other thing I would say, especially from our YouTube stuff, we spend, just to give you guys context, probably somewhere in the range of people hours, somewhere around 10 hours per video topic. Just the topic. Not anything about making a video, but we have like 5 people, just like a TV show, pitch topics. And then eventually we finally choose one. And so I'm just trying to give you guys benchmarks that like Sahil, like per tweet, I'm guessing how many hours, like you probably have a bunch of ideas and you pick the thing you're really interested in learning or you've learned and then like you're putting in the effort to do that. So I guess with the audience, what I'm saying is like, go and diarrhea a bunch out. But as you're doing that, keep trying to learn and get to the point where you're more intentional about what you're putting out and you're higher accuracy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it depends on the platform. It depends where you are, obviously. I think like YouTube, there's a really high bar to doing well, and you need to spend money, to your point earlier. I think Twitter is probably, for most people, a lower cost from a dollar perspective. It's definitely time consuming if you're going to write these longer pieces, but lower cost from a dollar perspective place to start, and can be a good kind of top of funnel, large discovery mechanism for everything else that you do. I mean, I did Twitter first and transitioned it into a newsletter and have funneled people effectively there. And now we have a show launching. And so it can be a really good place to start, but it's definitely time consuming. To Noah's point, you know, my general process is I use Notion, but I have this massive repository of ideas and things that I've come across, learned a little bit about, that I've just kind of logged. And then whenever I feel inspired to go deeper on something, I'll start reading more, dropping in notes, start formulating the notes into some form of narrative. Where am I going to add some level of insight, that it's not just kind of summarizing the exact thing from Wikipedia or whatever it is. And then, you know, go from there. But the pieces, you know, on the short end take 2-3 hours. And on the long end, I've spent, I don't know, 12 hours. I'm not really embarrassed to admit it, but I've spent a really, really long time on a few things where I felt like it was important for me to deepen my understanding. And again, to my point earlier, if you feel like you're learning and getting better at X, Y, or Z skill, or developing your knowledge base from doing that, I view that as positive in a number of different ways. I mean, it gives me stuff to talk about when I meet with people like Noah, and he wants to talk about some interesting thing that's happening in the economy or business, whatever it is. And I've written about it a bunch and spent a bunch of time researching it. That's only a net positive to my ability to interact with really smart people. And so I've always viewed it as being ROI very positive, even if the thread doesn't take off and it doesn't get me any new followers, doesn't grow me, etc.
Well, I'm gonna double click on Sahil, because I don't think he says it, but what he does as well is like he puts in the work to creating great content. But what he said earlier in the show, I'm just going to highlight, because I think it's so important, is that you have to go promote it. You have to have some plan about, did you email people? Did you ask it for a comment? Did you put out a retweet? Did you retweet your own stuff? Do you have some strategy? And the other thing that I think people miss out on is that people get fascinated with being a millionaire. Or people get fascinated with like how many followers you have. What's more fascinating to me is the impact of the quality of the audience. And so I really think people need to be mindful of like, don't worry how many followers you have, right? One, I don't want fucking followers. I think that's just a weird word, right? Like, I don't want anyone following me, right? Like, just be on the same side, right? Let's be in the audience together. But I think it's more how influence doesn't, it's not to try to trick people or influence them negatively, but like, how much do people actually give a shit what you have to say? Because I've seen people with like large audiences that no one gives a fuck about. But like, I will, you know, Tim Ferriss is probably the tier one of it. Like, people do whatever he says. People do whatever Tim says. And so I do think it's like, don't worry about how big your audience is, worry about the quality of the relationship. And a lot of that, what I do is like, I reply to not all my emails, but most of my emails get a reply from me. Most of my YouTube comments get a reply from me. DMs get a reply from me. And I think that's how you can build a very, very large audience, or small audience of like highly interesting people. And I mean, I think besides money and building a business out of it, like, content creation makes it so cool to meet people. Like, I get to meet someone like Sahil. So if I go to New York, I get to learn interesting things from him. Or even I'm in LA, and I'm gonna, like, Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street guy, because I posted stuff, like, hit me up. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So there's a lot of benefits outside of just like straight money from doing.
Yeah, I mean, the rooms you just start that was what kept me into it. I started writing just because I had more time on my hands during COVID, and I wasn't, you know, doing 90 hours a week at my old private equity job. And so I just had more time and I was enjoying it. But then you started to realize the rooms you're getting into and the people you get to be around, you know, and the people you can interact with, and this like open universe that we've created with these platforms. It's completely remarkable, the things you're learning from being around these people. And so I didn't consider myself particularly remarkable, nor do I today. But the people you get to be around are definitely remarkable at some level of it. And so there's something really, really amazing. And a lot of it just comes through consistent effort. You can't be the like flash in the pan with this type of stuff where you go and you put out one viral thing and now you assume everything's going to go viral. I mean, my first thread, to put it in perspective, the first thing I did, I had 500 followers at the time. I think it did, I don't know, 1,000 retweets, 5,000 likes. Like, I mean, it was legitimately viral. The next thing I put out, I think got like one retweet and 7 likes or something. And I remember thinking, like, I wanted to punch myself in the face, because I was like, oh, okay, it's not going to be that easy with everything you put out just doing great. I didn't really have a plan around it. And so, to Noah's point, you need to just be thoughtful about how you think about the pipes, like the actual distribution of what you're putting out there. It's not just the product that's just going to get seen. You need to like pay, in grocery terms and CPG terms, you pay slotting fees to be in the right spot within a grocery store. To be eye level, that costs a lot more. And so you're trying to get your content eye level with people. They need to see it.
I wish I had popcorn. This was like really just a great hour listening to y'all riff. I hope that, people got some good tactics out of there. Last thing I'll ask from y'all. It seems like Go Do the Damn Thing is really going to be the best resource for someone to learn about this stuff. But beyond that, what are some resources that you would point folks in the audience in the direction to learn more about audience growth?
Noah?
Yeah.
I'll say, Noah, you've got some like amazing old stuff that you put out 10 years ago. To be fair, I haven't read anything you put out in the last year, but like 10 years ago,
I'm not really putting out blog posts.
Okay,
I mean, I think, there's the Mint marketing plan that I put out, which is like kind of still how we do marketing to this day at AppSumo, and we did it at Mint, and I still do it on YouTube. A lot of days, I would recommend 2 things. One, just go get it from experience. Right. I think a lot of people, like, you can go look at Sahil, look at me, or look at anyone and like study it forever. But I think you're going to learn it most being on the court. And you have to get on the court and not a little bit, just go for it. Like, as Mitchell says, now, not how, which I think is one of my strong suits. Like, I'm very impulsive and I'm very action oriented, which makes me less strategic, but I'll get to the strategy eventually by the time someone starts moving. I think the second thing is just try to look at some of the data on this. And I hate when people say shit like that, because they say data and I'm like, what do you mean? So let me be specific. So in the YouTube game, I only look at 2 data points. I look at my CTR and I look at my AVD. So what does that mean? It's that what's the click-through rate to the video, meaning is the topic, title, and thumbnail good, and how much are people watching? And if we hit our benchmarks, which is 5% CTR and about 5-minute AVD, we have a banger. And so what I'm encouraging you, whatever platform it is, so if it's Instagram, if it's TikTok, if it's Twitter, understand the dial of what drives that audience growth, right? So on Twitter, I'm guessing it's some impact about how many, if you're trying to grow your audience, it's like how many likes are your videos getting, or your tweets getting, or how many people have you built relationships with that when you have a tweet, you can email them, or whatever the drivers are that you can control. I would just try to be mindful of that, because otherwise, like, I guess I just never like surprises or hope in business. So I think number 1, do it. Number 2, data. And then 3, study the people you're admiring and try to understand what the fuck they're doing that you can replicate. For me, I did a tweet 2 months ago. Someone told me that like people spend their more time planning their vacations than they do their careers. And I put out that tweet and it went super viral. And I was like, this is the point where it's like, I've seen other people do it, but I was like, what's happening that made that viral? And I actually Googled it, and it was a popular article from 2017. And then I was like, oh, that's it. If you keep going down, it's like, oh, that's an interesting strategy. Like, what are popular article headlines that I can just retweet from 2017 or whatever year? Because I'm increasing the probability that content's already been validated. So again, just like, what can you study that guarantees the higher success around your material?
Who did you study, Noah?
I'm not trying to grow Twitter, so I don't spend as much time there right now. But on the Twitter world, Sahil is on that list. Sean VP is on that list. Chris H, this young kid. I also noticed who I get annoyed with. Like, some of these people, I'm just like, this is such garbage. And A, I try to understand why it irritates me so much. And then B, I'm like, well, who do I really admire and what are they doing differently? And so you can go look at who I follow, twitter.com/Noah Kagan. And those are the people that I'm finding are doing, for me and what I'm interested in today, doing interesting things with their content.
Cool. Sahil?
I mean, I feel like that was a pretty comprehensive answer. On Twitter in particular, I have a lot of thoughts. It's like hard to get them, in terms of resources and things to do. We obviously teach the course, Aadil, that you were involved with, which I'm biased, but I think is a great, jumping off point. We've had a lot of great successes come out of that. It's, very much a deep dive into Twitter though, and kind of Twitter into newsletters. So there are people out there.
When's the next cohort of that?
I think we're doing the next one in January. which will be great. But I think the studying other people that have had success, and the way, and to Noah's point there at the end, the nuance is like the people whose success you would want that type of success, because you don't just want follower growth for the sake of follower growth. I think Noah said that earlier. There's, not every follower is equal in terms of the type of following you're building and the audience and the value of that audience that you're building. And so you should be deliberate about who are you emulating as you try to grow. When I was first starting to do threads weren't really a thing in the way that they are today. And so it felt, like I was sort of the first person to do this, basically like creating a Twitter native blog, right? Like I was writing a ton of these threads, and then I was using foundational ones as like a backdrop into new things I was writing, where I was linking to old threads within it and embedding it the same way, Ben Thompson can do that with his 10 years of amazing tech writing. I was able to do that with my like much less good Twitter writing and kind of be linking back through it. And it was keeping people on the platform. And so the algorithm was promoting it. But that type of writing now, you can find a number of different people doing it across different worlds. Like if you're into marketing, Amanda, who I think is involved, Amanda is a amazing writer, also an incredible marketer. She's writing great things on marketing. So if that's the world you're trying to get into, study what she's doing that's working really well. There are people like Julian, who has done a great job of kind of deeper thought pieces and writing on Twitter, and it's done well. So just figure out like the people you admire and the type of content they're doing, the type of following they're building, and see what you can learn from that and study it. And honestly, just DM people, ask questions. I've always been amazed by people's willingness to help. I still try to respond to most DMs. My DMs are a little bit more of a mess now than they were a few months ago. And so I'm not quite as good about it, just because the time is very tough to get to, but it's worth a shot, generally speaking. And so I'm a big believer in shoot or shoot. And so you might as well just take a shot on those kind of things.
Awesome. Thanks so much for both of you for being so generous with your time. What are you up to, and how can folks get in touch with you?
Noah, you're up to more interesting things than me, man. So
I did last night. We had dinner with Peter Thiel. That guy is so
that's pretty interesting.
That was really interesting. But the real interesting thing about it, he still wears underwear and socks just like the rest of us. And he wears like, Hanes or something. I was like, huh. He also uses a toilet. Like,
yeah, well, that was have you ever heard that saying? This was like one of the biggest realizations for me in life. Like someone told me, just think like whenever you meet someone impressive that you're blown away by and you're really nervous and intimidated to be around, like twice a day, that person, or once a day, whatever, goes into the bathroom and takes a crap. And that'll make you realize that everybody's just human and like not intimidating, and they do the same things as you. And originally I heard it in the context of dating. I think my friend told me that, to just like not be intimidated to talk to someone new. But I think it applies to just much more broadly in life. So it's a funny thing that you bring up that.
Yeah. Well, when he's worth $5 billion, he may not actually have to go to the bathroom. He probably has someone follow him.
Like in the metaverse, it just gets sucked out of you, actually.
Yeah, it's like a Floby. Yeah, follow Sahil Bloom. Is it Twitter? Yeah, Twitter Sahil Bloom.
Yeah.
For me, Twitter. I mostly YouTube. We are gonna start doing the Twitter stuff.
We got to do a video together, Noah.
Dude, in New York.
And we got to get you on the show too. We got to get you on the Where It Happens pod with Greg Eisenberg.
Yeah, we can do like a cross promo thing.
Yeah, I'd love to
just get to know you better. One thing that I would say as well, or I guess two things I would highlight, is one, it should be fucking fun.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of these people are like, I want to build an audience, or I don't know, for the people that are in the chat, can you guys leave comments, or like, do you guys have day jobs? Are you side hustling? Are you trying to build up an audience? Like, where are you guys all at? A lot of people have so Samuel's got a day job. Owen's a startup founder. Day job.
I did this like the day job thing. I did this on the side with a 80 to 90 hour a week day job for the first 18 months of doing it, and then ended up transitioning out of that role because it had become so real with all these new things. So I was there in that struggle and understanding it for sure.
Dude, yeah, maybe we can shout out one person. So twitter.com Noah Kagan, youtube.com/OKDork, and then Sahil. I got an idea after this, but Sahil, what's your Twitter and YouTube?
At Sahil Bloom.
Twitter at Sahil Bloom. Let me just put that out there. All right, so I want the audience. We're gonna do a fun thing real fast.
You got audience. 1 minute, Noah.
Yeah, who in the audience should we all follow? It seems like everyone's super hyped on this Amanda woman.
Yeah, she's amazing. I am a huge proponent of Amanda.
Shout out
She's
Amanda.
awesome. Yeah.
Amanda Natividad. So Amanda,
Yeah.
put your Twitter thing. I'll go follow you for a few days. And then maybe everyone else can give her some love.
Yeah, Amanda's a goat. She's
I
great.
love that.
Also just an amazing person. Shout out Amanda.
Dude, I love it.
All right, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you so
This was
much,
great.
Aadil, for having us. Noah, I'm going to text you, man. We got to hang out.
Appreciate you both. Yeah, you can both. I'll see
I'm
you
not
both
Peter
backstage
Thiel,
in just a
but-
second.
I do still wear underwear.
I mean,
We'll
what
talk
about
soon.
good? He had like cheap socks on. I was like, dude, you could afford any. You could
Because
have
all the
handmade
money's in his
socks.
IRA, dude. It's not real cash.
Dude, he talked about that. It was so interesting. Are we? Well, yeah, I'll text you about it.
We'll talk soon, guys. See
All right. See y'all backstage
All right,
in a
see you,
sec.
Sahil.
you, everyone.
Are we? Oh, we're in like the backstage area.
Are we?
I don't know. Are we?